All right, Matt, in this week's episode of This Week in MMA, we're going to get into UFC 244, my favorite segment of the show, the Twitter Purge, and we're going to preview and recap a week in MMA. So, Matt, let's get into it. And welcome to another episode of This Week in MMA. As always, one half of your co-hosting duo, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. You can find Matt on Twitter and Instagram at Matt Allen FNP. And Matt, let's tell the people what we're all about.
Let's do it.
Normally what we do is a weekly show like this, but listen, there's a lot of new people on the train. First thing that we did was an audio podcast. I was talking into a microphone like this for 2.5 hours about fights that nobody cared about, breaking them down in incredible detail. And listen, maybe you stumbled upon this from our 2-minute predictions. We've expanded those into a main and co-main of 5 minutes, which it gives us a little bit more time to break those fights down in all that more detail. And this weekend, it made a lot of sense for us to make that transition because in your co-main, a great fight there between Darren Till and Kelvin Gastelum, and we're going to get back into that one a little bit later on.
Hopefully it happens.
But the main event, the BMF title on the line, say what you will about it. It's a great fight. You could have marketed this without a title. It would have sold pay-per-view. So we're really excited about that. But just kind of give you a bit of a background. We're coming at you from Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. So we got a bit of a unique perspective on MMA from that kind of angle.
In the middle of nowhere.
Next weekend, we're going to be down in Maine covering New England Fights 41, so it should be a good fight card. You can check out all of that type of action on our website, fightnightpicks.net, articles, just audio podcast, the video content, everything's there. So, Matt, let's get into This Week in MMA. So, what we're going to do in these type of podcasts is we're going to expand upon some of the fights that we already talked about, but we're also going to go one step further. So, I mean, this weekend, you got some pretty decent cards. You've got the PFL this Thursday. You've got Invicta on Friday. You've got all sorts of different MMA going on, including UFC 244. So, we're going to get into some of those prelim fights that you should definitely know about because that card's stacked top to bottom.
Phenomenal.
We're going to get more in detail on some of those main card fights, some of the things that we might have missed during the 2 or 5 minute predictions. We're also going to get into my favorite segment of the show. It seriously is. It opens up a discussion called the Twitter Purge, where we go out and pick some of the biggest news from this week on social media, most likely on Twitter. Matt, what are some of the stories that you saw that might not be on Twitter, but some of the things that you were following or paying attention to this week? I mean, there's been all sorts of things, and I know we originally kind of slated to do the show on Monday night. We ran out of time, but one of the biggest things there was the UFC /USADA /Diaz controversy that we had at the end of last week coming into this week. I mean, it's kind of weird that took place. Now it's all swept under the rug and we get the fight, but can you kind of break that one down a little bit?
So here's the thing. The fact that there's no transparency between USADA, their policy, the athletes, and then the fans as well, it's a really big problem because as we saw with the John Jones thing where they just completely moved a whole event from Las Vegas to California due to some USADA issues. And then now with the whole Nate Diaz thing, it looks like they do give stars preferential treatment when it does come to any violations or whatnot. But if you actually look at it more in depth, Neil Magny kind of went through this whole thing. It would have been about a year ago now, and he had been suspended, but then retroactively they got back. They saw that there was no wrongdoing on his part, so they stopped the suspension, said that he was cleared of all wrongdoing, and then that made kind of room for this policy that Nate Diaz took advantage of. Not take advantage of, but that he got to use so that he's not suspended for the weekend. So basically, Nate Diaz has been cleared of all wrongdoing, but the real big problem is USADA. They're kind of like the UFC's way of saying, like, look, we're doing our best. We're trying to make it as clean as possible and make the sport as good as possible. But there's 100% people out there who are still cheating, not to point any fingers and name any names. But you know that rampant drug use is a really big problem in MMA, any contact sport, really.
Any sport.
Exactly. In any sport, no matter what. And just the fact that the sport that you guys care about as much as we do is a combat sport, and that it's not like you're just hitting a baseball 100 feet further or you're able to hit it more often. You're hitting people in the head, and that has long-term conditions that can really affect someone.
It's not just Adderall use in chess. This is real life here. And yeah, it's certainly kind of mind-blowing the fact that they said maybe there's a potential issue, elevated levels here and there. Of course, Nate Diaz being a
BMF,
big time BMF, but a vegan, and going out there and saying the Terminator's vegan, but also following it up by the whole Foods thing. I mean, this is one of the more transparent guys that you see out there. So it's good that we get a chance to have the fight on our hands. At the same time, it's kind of weird because to me, I look directly at the situation from 2017, UFC 200, where Brock Lesnar was able to just re-enter just like that after the fight, test positive for,
Clomiphene.
Yeah, exactly. And it was found that he tested positive before the fight as well as after the fight. It's something that you never want to see again.
No,
And you
exactly.
bring up a good point. It's combat sports, and I joke, Adderall and chess, but it's a real, really big deal.
And that's the really weird thing too, because you'll see some guys will get suspended, and it's like they don't put that much thought into the whole thing. Like with Josh Barnett, he lost pretty much 4 years of his whole career, and I know with him it's a little bit different because he had been not just accused, he had done steroids in the past. I'm not breaking any news or anything, but in his last sort of USADA violation, he didn't do anything wrong, and it just so happened that the whole policy around it kind of screwed it up. And I think that's the big problem. Everyone wants some form of drug testing, but I feel like the athletes themselves need to have a say in, how strict the testing is and what kind of rights that the testers should have. Because right now, USADA has all the power right now, and they kind of do whatever they want, whenever they want. And I feel like the fighters think that USADA's on their side. And to some degree, they are, but there's definitely a better way to go about doing drug testing. You could do VADA, which is the voluntary anti-doping agency. And it would be just as good.
Here's something that I kind of want to touch on just quick. I don't mean to cut you off, but one of the things that's out there is if you go onto USADA's website, you read up on some of these policies and the different types of compounds you can take. And we've talked about it here on the podcast. I mean, you look at a guy like Francis Ngannou, who's a physical specimen. I mean, if you could...
He's as big as a natural
person. If you could make a perfect human, it would be a mix of Paulo Costa and Francis Ngannou. I mean, the guys are like Greek gods, but you look at a guy like Francis Ngannou who doesn't take anything.
He doesn't even take protein powder.
Yeah, it's all natural because he doesn't want to test positive and risk losing a portion of his career. So you have to take that into account. You look on their website, and yes, they say if you submit a sample of a product that you'd like to take, we can send it away to get a third party tested. Here's a list of some of the things that you maybe could take or should take, but they don't point you in a direct direction. No. If you go with WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, there is a list on there of approved supplements. And yes, you can third-party test, but it's always so difficult to tell. I mean, you have a quick look at some of the substances that these men and women are taking. I mean, for instance, an easy one, creatine. Creatine's made in a vat in a lab. Who knows how... who knows
if
what
it was improperly cleaned or anything.
Yeah, who knows what their prep and their cleanup is in terms of making some of these different supplements. So after creatine, they could go in there and build some type of chemical compound that is a banned substance. And then there's trace amounts in whatever supplements made. Of course, we know what happened to Yoel Romero and everybody. And I feel like there's still a sense where, yeah, he cheated, but he didn't cheat.
No, he didn't.
Like, he didn't. You look at the guy.
He made $30 million. That's what he did.
But just to do the eye test, it's never true. I mean, you look at Francis Ngannou, Yoel Romero, physical specimens. But the point I'm trying to say is that if you go on USADA's website, they say if there's an NSF label on something, that should be pretty much good enough. But you never really know. Okay. So it's never an exact science. It's never something you can really know.
Here's my question for you. Are there people in the UFC right now who have not been caught taking steroids and or performance-enhancing drugs right now?
The thing with not just MMA, the thing with sports in general...
I'm talking strictly MMA because they are the ones who have USADA in effect.
Yeah. Pick Major League Baseball. Mm-hmm. Stringent drug testing. Hockey, not so much. But MLB, we'll go with MLB and NFL. There's got to be designer drugs.
NFL's not strict at all.
There's got to be designer drugs and different things that they can take to cheat the test. I mean, in MMA, EPO was a big thing that you could kind of hide from. Up until the end of last year, they came out with new testing policies. Now the question is, of course, TJ Dillashaw testing positive after his fight with Cejudo. Do we go back? Do we go back in time? No. Can we go back in time and test old samples to see if fighter A or fighter B was taking EPO or the substance that's now banned or that they can now test for? So if they couldn't test for EPO, which is a drug that's been around for a long time, especially in the cycling community, if they couldn't test for that before, I'm sure there's all sorts of different compounds that they can't test for currently in MMA, in other sports, that give you a competitive advantage. I mean, take it for instance, Adderall. I brought it up. It's a pretty decent one because, helps focus in. It some people consider it not a performance enhancer. Some people do.
Of course it is.
If you look into a sport like baseball, yeah, you're not going to hurt anybody. But you look at different baseball players like Chris Davis. The issue there, he was taking Adderall. It helps you focus in, the vision on the ball. Same thing. Going to throw a punch, it's going to help you, cognitively. So there's all sorts of things that are out there. To answer your question, I'm sure there's
That's what I mean.
compounds out
I
there
feel
that are
like
legal.
the UFC needs to sit down at the table with the fighters, which is going to be a big issue no matter what, and try to just get some sort of clarity and have an agreement on the doping policy. Because USADA was brought in by the UFC to kind of cover their asses in case there ever was a major injury, and then they can come out and say, listen, they're as tested as possible. It's not our fault. It's just kind of like a safeguard for them in case anything ever major does happen. So is there not kind of a middle ground that they can meet?
The one thing I will say, that would be very easy if you had a fighters union. The only trouble is you don't have a fighters union, so it's probably not going to happen. But Matt, we'll leave that discussion there. I want to hear what people are thinking because the whole USADA thing, it comes up all the time, and I think there's good intentions there. It's just something that's going to have to be figured out over the coming years.
It's just a poor execution. That's really all it is.
Yeah, there's certainly holes in the game. So Matt, let's throw it over to my favorite segment of the show. We're going to get into the Twitter Purge. We've got some good topics. So Matt, let's get into the Twitter Purge.
It's time for the Twitter Purge.
All right, Matt, so it is time for the Twitter Purge. My first tweet of the week is one that came out today. We're filming this on Wednesday, the 30th of October. From Brett Okamoto, he said, per a UFC source, there were some last-minute hurdles regarding Darren Till's visa this week. Those issues have been resolved. He's scheduled to arrive in New York tomorrow. Tomorrow being Thursday. The narrative's kind of shifted since then, so that was 2 hours ago from us filming. It shifted a little bit. There's a story on MMA fighting. There's different reports coming out right now. The fact that Darren Till might end up showing up on Friday only until the early morning weigh-ins, which is kind of surprising to me. And visa issues like this, it's weird that they happen fight week to me. It's really weird because you look at fighters like Vitaly Minakov. He's supposed to come in from Russia and fight in Bellator last weekend against Javi Ayala. Visa issues a day or two before the fight. It seems like almost an oversight.
It really does. It's kind of weird, too, because you will hear about this sometimes, but it'll be a month or 2 months before the fight actually gets scheduled, so then you can kind of work your way around it, get both teams involved. But yeah, it's really odd that we're seeing this the week of. Hopefully, well, it probably has something to do with that whole, stealing of a taxi.
But especially somebody in your co-main event.
Exactly. You would think that the UFC themselves would figure out all this stuff in advance just so the athlete only has to worry about showing up and, going to work, basically.
Kind of an
and
odd...
It's unfortunate, too, not to cut you off, but everyone thinks, it's not that big of a deal. Darren Till's going to make weight because he moved up in weight. Darren Till still walks around like 200 pounds. He probably gained weight anyways in preparation for moving up to 185, so he might miss weight again.
So to bring us, not full circle, but yeah, visa issues delaying Darren Till's UFC 244 arrival from MMA fighting, and Gilbert Burns with a whole bunch of eyes. Now, he's already in New York to support a fellow teammate, Vicente Luque, getting ready for his fight against Wonderboy Thompson, which very well could be a fight of the night. But the point is, Gilbert Burns is always ready.
Gilbert Burns, his nickname's Triple A for a reason. Anywhere, anytime, any weight. And that could be a fun... Of course, I think Kelvin Gastelum...
Going up 30 pounds?
Yeah, Kelvin Gastelum... Well, no, only 15 because he's welterweight now. But Kelvin Gastelum's massive, hits really hard, and he's at the top of pretty much 2 weight classes he's been at the top of. Gilbert Burns, I'm a huge fan of, and I think he's going to go on to do great things in the sport. Isn't at that level just yet. I'd like to see it for him, because if he could somehow come in on the week of the fight, move up a weight class, and beat a top...
main event.
Yeah, and beat a top 4 guy in Kelvin Gastelum, it'd be insane. But I doubt that the UFC would even put that fight together, to be honest.
I mean, we'll see what happens. He's a really interesting guy, because you and I have been talking about him for the longest time. One of those guys that has so many different skill sets if you could just pull them together. And now all of a sudden, at the tail end of 155 and now into 170, he's really put everything together and looked great. And if we continue on with UFC 244, our last point, it has been more or less confirmed that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson will put the belt on either Masvidal or Diaz at UFC 244. It was in question, of course, with Diaz. Is he in? Is he out? We'll see what happens. But yeah, he's going to be in. Do you think that The Rock actually will bring in more eyes to this pay-per-view?
No, because he goes to pay-per-views anyways, and I don't think that ever affects it. I just think it's a fun thing. That's the thing. I don't mind gimmickiness in MMA because everyone's trying to get paid, and if you get your name out there, you're going to get paid.
You don't mind 50 Cent with Get the Strap?
I don't mind 50 Cent would Get the Strap and whatever his champagne's called that Douglas Leva doesn't drink.
Le Chemin du Roi.
There you go. I just think it's kind of a fun thing to do. They kind of realize it's just them being self-aware that okay, this belt's kind of ridiculous. All of our other MSG cards have been headlined by like all-time greats, and they've been this crazy big cards. Now, let's just have a fun card. And I don't think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson adds or really subtracts anything from it.
All right, I think that's totally fair. And if we continue to move along, so some interesting developments from this past week. Paulo Costa out of his bout, or rumored bout, with Israel Adesanya. He was just making too many gains in the weight room. And
Tore his bicep.
Yeah, tore his bicep. So in steps the conversation that Israel Adesanya had with Mr. Eugene from
Who
City
is a
Kickboxing.
wizard. We did learn that.
City Kickboxing. His own. And possibility that Yoel Romero and Israel Adesanya is a fight, which is weird because when was the last time Yoel Romero won a fight?
Luke
Rockhold, UFC 221. So it's been a while.
Hot minute.
And listen, Yoel Romero inserts himself right into that conversation. Now, it's kind of weird because, again, we talked about this at the start of the show. Yoel Romero is one of those guys that maybe he's not a heel, but he wasn't the most loved person. Now he's getting up there in years. He's past 40 by quite a bit.
But everyone loves Yoel Romero.
But everybody loves him now. And he's kind of cutesy over there on Twitter. Is this a fight that you'd like to see?
It is, even though it doesn't make much sense from a ranking standpoint or a record standpoint. Everyone knows Yoel Romero is one of those kind of unique fighters where, and I know people are kind of sick and tired of it, he's kind of like Frank Edgar or Holly Holm, where it's never a bad idea to throw them in a title fight, just due to their name and what they've done in the sport. And I feel like Yoel Romero is kind of in that category. He's proven himself enough that he hasn't been a champion yet, but he's one of the better fighters to never win a title in the UFC. I'd put him, Jacare, Costa, like those kinds of guys. So you can always throw someone like them in a title fight. And of course, I'm sure they're going to bring the fact that his last two decision fights have been quite controversial. One being the split decision loss to Robert Whittaker. I thought Whittaker won that fight. One being the unanimous decision loss to Paulo Costa. I thought Paulo Costa won that fight. But I can still admit that both fights were extremely close.
How do you see a fight going between Adesanya and Romero?
If you would have asked me that before Adesanya fought Robert Whittaker, I would have said Yoel Romero probably wins. But after that fight against Whittaker didn't even look bad. Like, he looked pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Adesanya is so much faster than everyone on the feet. It's insane. Like, we were talking about this before. If the Costa fight did come to fruition, what would happen? Spoiler alert, I think Adesanya lights him up like a Christmas tree. And I feel like Yoel is a wrestler and he has really good wrestling, but he doesn't use it.
That's what I was going to say. I think the weird X factor in a fight with Adesanya and Yoel Romero would just be the fact that Yoel Romero is going to try and strike. He's not going to go wrestle heavy. He's not going to go takedown heavy. You see what happened to Ben Askren against Jorge Masvidal. But Yoel Romero, obviously more dynamic, more seasoned, especially against top competition in
MMA,
UFC.
yes,
That's the big point there. But I'd be interested to see the fight. I would certainly favor the champ in Adesanya, but that would be a really good fight, and I think we'll leave that right there.
Honestly, Jared Cannonier would be another great choice, too. Jared Cannonier's gone on a streak. He just won a main event, and that's always a good sign, too. When a guy wins a main event, it's different than if you had the third against the fifth-ranked guy in, like, the co-main event of a fight night. But since he was the main event, he got a lot more eyes on that.
Trained for a 5-round fight.
Exactly. He's all loaded up on pyrite. He's good to go. He's got his chakras in order, or they're aligned. Jared Cannonier could beat a lot of guys in that middleweight division, and it would be nice to see him get that fight. I doubt he will just off name value alone, because everyone knows who Yoel Romero is. No one knows who Jared Cannonier is, but he's always a good option to get thrown into.
Yeah, and I'd certainly like to see that. One thing that I was really surprised about, not so much, but surprised that it came out this week, the fact that Bellator officially signed Kat Zingano, who's going to slot into a top 5 role in the division's featherweight division, the women's featherweight division is what I meant to say. But now all of a sudden you've got Julia Budd, your champ. She's going to be taking Chris Cyborg in 2020. You've got Kat Zingano. You've got Sinead Kavanaugh. You've got Olga Rubin, Leslie Smith. They continue to add to a division. At this point, Bellator's women's featherweight division, it not only rivals the UFC's, and I have to say that.
He doesn't have a
featherweight. I have to say that with a grain of salt because of who your champ is in Amanda Nunes. But Bellator has a better women's featherweight division than the UFC.
Let's be honest. If Amanda Nunes went to Bellator, I think Amanda Nunes is arguably the greatest just MMA fighter of all time, regardless of gender. That's how good I think Amanda Nunes is. She's champ. She finishes everybody, and she doesn't really have that many competitive fights. If she went over to Bellator, she would run through that division. But, like you said, just due to the depth, and there is a lot of really good talent in there, I do see them doing Kat Zingano versus Leslie Smith. I think they will kind of make that UFC matchup, and then that could be your number one contendership for when Julia Budd does fight Chris Cyborg. It is a good pickup, though. Kat Zingano is someone who, she's kind of fallen on hard times recently. She did take a toe to the eye, but she's a name that people recognize.
And she's a better MMA pickup, and that's just from a pure skill standpoint than you saw this past weekend, which a lot of people tuned into this, surprisingly. with Beck Rawlings. Beck Rawlings taking on
Don't get me started.
Jesse Mealy. And I was on the Loudmouth MMA Bellator recap show with Keith Schillen from Sherdog, and Keith covered the weekend in total, boots on the ground in person, has a long-standing relationship with Jesse Mealy, and the conversation that we had was, she's a regional fighter. She fights somebody like Beck Rawlings. All of a sudden, you insert yourself into like a title picture, and it's not a joke. It's serious. I mean, you go from being a decent regional talent to somebody that's all of a sudden you beat a very recognizable name. The thing with Beck Rawlings, the issue is
Police Gazette.
She's 7-9 in MMA. She's lost her last four MMA fights now.
No, 5. It would be
5. But she won 3 bare knuckle in a row. So bare knuckle's a future for her. But for somebody like Zingano, the point being, has had success in MMA recently and has had fairly competitive fights. I think directly of the fight against Marion Renault. I mean, that was a great fight that she had there. So it's for sure a good pickup for Bellator, and I'm really looking forward to this because it's awesome that they've really invested time, energy, and money into the division to make it what it is, and it's certainly competitive.
Exactly.
I mean,
they just need Cindy Dandois, and it will be a perfect division.
And every now and again, Cindy moonlights with Bellator, so you never know what could happen. Now, Matt,
so bad.
Really fun fight that was made. You've got a coast-to-coast fight here. You've got New England versus Pacific Northwest. You've got Rob Font taking on Ricky Simone. I saw this one pop off last night. I think it was Marcel Dorff. It was the first tweet that I saw. I think Nolan King also reported on this one as well, but we just picked Nick Baldwin's tweet here with Bloody Elbow. Rob Font and Ricky Simone. I mean, what kind of a fun fight is this?
It's going to be a fight of the night contender no matter what card it's on. I think Rob Font's quite a bit better, though. That's the weird thing. I still see Ricky Simone as a prospect who should be treated as a prospect. I know he fought Uriah Faber in his last fight. That was a huge step up in competition for him, even though Uriah was out for a long time. I know we both picked Ricky to win that fight, but I just feel like Rob Font is so established, and right now, he's one of those guys, he's 2 fights away from a title fight.
Yeah.
So you have a guy who has big power, good on the ground, good on the feet, doesn't really have any major holes in his game, fighting this guy who, in large part, is still relatively a prospect. It's kind of tough fight for Ricky Simone coming off that Uriah Faber loss, but it's a phenomenal fight. And it's a fight, I could see Simone winning it as well. I think the odds would be fairly close. There's things that he does well, but the thing with Rob Font is he hits so damn hard. He's going to jab you 100 times, and they're all strong jabs. It's not like he's just tapping you, and then he's going to hit you with that right hand. He's going to head kick. Rob Font's a problem on the feet, so it should be a fun fight. I do think on the ground that'll be a really fun one too if it does make it there. So no, great matchmaking by the UFC. Now, Matt, the last tweet that I'm going to leave us with, and this opens up a Pandora's box. I'm going to get awfully upset real soon. So Tyson Fury talking to Sky Sport. So there's a chance he's going to consider MMA. He talked about it. He also talked about possibly training with Conor McGregor to get ready for it. They talked about it. Of course, McGregor's tweet there, up the Furies, let's go. I think it's all just a ploy. It's just a marketing thing. I mean, you see Tyson Fury showing up at WWE events trying to get involved. He's got this feud with Braun Strowman. There's Cain Velasquez. I like Tyson Fury's chances in that fight. There's all this stuff. Tyson Fury is a very, very, very good marketer. He's a character for sure. He's a character. He's a great interview. You see him on Mike Tyson's podcast. You see him everywhere. I think he's just trying to pump things up, but let's go a different route with this one. If he did get into MMA? Let's say Tyson Fury says, all right, I'm moving the gypsy lifestyle to Ireland. They're travelers. Apologies. His nickname being the Gypsy King. He's going to move his camp over to SBG. He's going to train full-time in MMA. Yep. He's not going to have a lot of sparring partners there near his weight class, but he's going to train directly with Conor McGregor to get ready for an MMA fight. Would he be able to crack the UFC's top 10? How long does he have? Let's say a year. Let's say in a year. No, just because let's say he fights 3 times a year. Even at best, he wouldn't get into the top 10, just due to the fact that they wouldn't match him up with any high-level guys to begin with. I think all Tyson Fury needs is takedown defense. And especially at heavyweight, it's very shallow. And the skill set of a heavyweight isn't near what the skill set of like a lightweight is. At lightweight, you have to be well-rounded and pretty much a 9 out of 10 in every realm of MMA. And heavyweight, you can get away with a lot of flush because your power can take you so far. And even though Tyson Fury doesn't have like crippling power in boxing, he would still be by far the best boxer to ever translate into MMA. And better than James Toney? Far better than James Toney. James Toney was 73 and looked like he ate 70 egos before that fight. That was a tough one to watch. But no, Tyson Fury, if he gets takedown defense, yes, of course, he could be in the top 10. It would take a little while for him to get there. And I really don't see him giving up like the Deontay Wilder paydays, the Andy Ruiz Jr. paydays, just to go into MMA and make like $100,000.
Yeah, that's a pretty good.
It doesn't
point
make any
there.
sense.
You'd almost have to have an ownership stake or more than pay-per-view.
Yeah, he
points
fights
to make
Deontay
sense.
Wilder in February again, and that's going to make him, what, $30 million more? Why would you give that up to fight Derek Lewis? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Maybe as a test, maybe that's something. I don't know, but it's just something interesting to ponder. My point was, if you give him a full year to just train in MMA, work that takedown defense, work the
Can you at
grappling
least give me like a few
situations,
potential opponents?
work the knees. Let's just run through a couple of scenarios. So you've got some guys that are fringe in the top 10. They move up, they move down. Marcin Tybura.
Beats the brakes off him.
You think he beats Marcin Tybura? Okay. Shamil Durkimov.
No, Shamil takes him down and beats the F out of him.
Augusto Sakai.
Augusto Sakai takes him down. That's the thing. Anyone who has any wrestling is going to beat him. But if you fight, it's weird because let's say Derek Lewis, and Derek Lewis does have pretty good offensive wrestling. We've seen it before. He can
Top 10 fighter.
He can hit you with that nice power double leg. Tyson Fury probably beats him, depending. But that's the hard thing too. Like, a guy who's a really good striker who then comes into MMA, they have to always be worried about the takedown, so their hands are going to be naturally low no matter what. And that means that a guy like Derek Lewis, all he has to do is fake a takedown, throw an overhand right, and he's going to knock you out.
The one fighter that we have to bring up and have the conversation about, a guy that's moving up to take on a top 10 heavyweight that we never thought would really be a possibility, Greg Hardy.
Craig, I'm going to tell you this right now, and I've never been more sure of anything in my whole entire life. If Tyson Fury got off the couch at 400 pounds after a whole night bender, like he was 2 years ago, they better have an ambulance waiting for Greg Hardy. Tyson Fury would beat him within an inch of his life. It wouldn't be a fun fight to watch.
No.
That's why I think the Alexander Volkov fight's going to go. I really do. I don't see that being competitive in the least bit unless Greg Hardy can throw a Hail Mary to begin with and knock him out.
That's why it's a heck of a test, and I think they're throwing him into too deep of
I think
waters,
they're
and
saying,
they know,
hey, inhaler, go to Russia. And fight
they know what the result's going to be. But Matt, really interesting stuff
Really
here. My
interesting.
favorite segment of the show, because it actually starts a pretty decent conversation, and it's not something that
Usually
we look
ends with
into.
one of us angry.
Yeah, we don't look into too much before, and it makes for a pretty good segment. So Matt, we're going to transition this into a weekend recap and a bit of a preview. We're going to talk what happened last week in some detail. We're going to talk about the fights coming up this weekend, and there's some good ones here. You're not going to want to miss that. Fight Night Picks is brought to you by Strikeforce Energy. Head on over to the website, strikeforceenergy.com. If you enjoy the flavor of freedom, the company's veteran-owned and everything's made in America. They've got great apparel. You can turn any 16.9-ounce beverage into an energy drink. There's no sugar, no calories, no stirring, or no shaking required. They also have a line of different products as well as Strikeforce coffee. So if I head into my cart, I've got a 4-count sample pack. I've got a 20-ounce coffee mug. And if I head into that checkout, use the promo code FNP, click to apply, and you're going to save 20% off any order. That's FNP at strikeforceenergy.com. So it's brought to you by Spretzbox. Head on over to the website, spretzbox.com. All you have to do, click to get started. You can either order one of their boxes that has over $100 in value, or maybe you're interested in a single item, like these great socks. So click on them, add them to your cart, head on over to the checkout, and then all you have to do is enter in the promo code FNP as follows here. You'll save 10% off your first box or your complete first order. That's Spretzbox.com. All right, Matt, so it's time for the weekend recap and preview. We're going to start with last weekend and the recap. You had UFC Singapore, Bellator 231, Bellator 232, the big cards. I had a chance to watch every one of them, I guess. But, Matt, a lot of big takeaways from UFC Singapore. So we'll roll through the card here. Somewhat briefly. I mean, I was kind of surprised Rafael Pessoa getting the win over Jeff Hughes. Figured Jeff Hughes going to be fresh from that Todd Duffy fight, wanting his first UFC win.
It's a tough fight.
Loma Lookboonmee gets a win over Alessandra Albu, albeit that was controversial in the split decision. I know a lot of people were surprised by that one. Sergey Pavlovich looked great against Maurice Green. This is a guy that they brought in and gave him to the Ream automatically,
Can't be doing that.
Was a mistake because I know he was great in Fight Nights Global and you want to test him, but that was way too much of a test. Evloev getting the win over Barzola.
I was surprised on that.
Kind of surprised there as well. Fisev getting the win over Alex White. And if we continue on, Reina Marcos, Ashley Yoder. I was actually kind of surprised it was a split decision. I had it 29-28 for Marcos. Not a Canadian thing, but she did fight a really good fight.
She did.
One of those things where I say this every time. Carla Esparza and Reina Marcos, every time I watch them fight, they remind me of each other, but every time they come out, it's like they add something new to their game or they evolve just a little bit more. They show something else. I thought Reina Marcos, her striking looked great in this fight.
She fought Ashley Yoder.
I will say her striking looked good.
But that's fine if you're fighting Ashley Yoder.
Well, I'll leave it there. Muslim Salikov taking on Laureano
was great.
Staropoli. That was a really fun fight. We said there was a possibility that could be fight of the night. It wasn't, but it
could have
was.
been.
It was. I mean,
Maybe.
a 3-round decision. You've got Salikov, winner by unanimous decision. He fought a great fight, and at 170, like, I know he's 35, but man, he looks pretty good. Like, I'd want to see him fight maybe somebody who's really wrestle heavy.
Nico Price.
But, I mean, a fight against Muslim Salikov, there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to want to take that
exactly.
call.
He's a dangerous guy that no one knows about.
And I also want to say, Laureano Staropoli, I mean, that's his second loss, but he also looked really good in that
He did
fight.
fight a really good fight. He just fought, basically, it was a guy who has a lot of skills versus a kickboxer, and they ended up having a kickboxing fight. It was still a great fight, though.
It was a great fight. And then our next fight, Matt,
Still a weird one.
took Cyril Gahn to beat Dontel Mays, and it was a fun fight. Gahn was doing great. And then the fight's almost over, and I'm about to put in, I think I had it 30-27. I mean, Mays didn't look terrible, but
No.
Gahn just looks like an extra level above. He's also said since this fight that, you know, if somebody calls before the end of the year, he'll take that fight. Like, he'll take anybody, top 10, whatever. He wants to take on those top guys. Pulls out a heel hook, and it was insane. I know it was almost the end of the fight, but Cyril Gahn, I mean, we
Okay, I have a problem with the heel hook. I think it's bad I think it's more of a negative than a positive. The fact that he was willing to go back and go for a heel hook with 15 seconds left of a fight he was guaranteed to win. I know you want your fighters to try to finish fights, but you're a heavyweight. If you mess that up, and if you get hit in the head twice, you're going to sleep. So I actually don't see that as an overwhelming positive. I think it's nice that a heavyweight got a heel hook. He showed kind of another wrinkle of his game. But in a fight IQ sense, I don't think that was the best choice.
I mean, I'm going to counter you there. And the thing that I'll say is if you look at Dontel May's record and overall body of work and you watch him fight, the guy is a striker and a brawler. And I understand what you're saying. It's just, it speaks to the depth that Cyril Gahn has on the ground, personally.
I don't think it speaks to the depth. I just think it speaks more. Dontel Mays doesn't have a good ground game whatsoever. And that Cyril Gahn has a developing ground game, and which I'm sure this is probably what it is. He's learning a lot of things in the gym that he wants to apply into an MMA fight. And this was a chance for him to do that. And I think that is a positive.
Same as his submission win before this against Kazoa with the head and arm triangle.
And I think that those are positive signs, and it does show that he has such a well-rounded skill set. But in a fight IQ sense, that's definitely not your best idea with 15 seconds left.
And if he's going to take on somebody who's in the top 10, you can't take as many risks.
No.
I certainly
like if he
understand
fought Derek
what you're
Lewis and tried to do that, that's the problem with heel hooks and why you don't see so many leg locks and heel hooks in MMA. If you don't get it, you're giving up top position to your opponent, and you're going to get hit and grounded out. Unless you're Gary Tonin or Chrome Gracie or Nate Diaz or Damian Maia, it's not a great idea to pull guard basically for a heel hook with 15 seconds left in a fight that you're winning. That's all. I think he looked really good. I think he beat guys in the top 10 already. I really do. And I think he's going to have to fight Francis at some point, because I can see Francis being the champ within the next couple of years. And if he wants to be champ, it's going to have to happen if both guys want to be champ. That's the problem.
Daniel Cormier, Cain Velasquez. I don't think it will, but still.
But maybe. And all I'm saying is he's way more developed than he should be at only 5-0 in MMA, and he's going to be a very big problem for everyone in the world. It's just that worries me a little bit. I doubt he's going to do that if he does fight more dangerous competition, but just something to look out for.
All right, I appreciate your comments there. And if we continue along, listen, Beneil Dariush taking on Frank Camacho. We told you all different kinds of outcomes. I think we both picked Dariush by decision.
No, I said submission.
You said submission. He gets the win by submission in the first round. He looked great. I mean, he only needed 2.5 or just over 2 minutes to get it done. Had a lot of really nice things to say about Frank Camacho after the fight, which I thought was pretty cool. But Beneil Dariush, I mean, just continues to prove that I know he's a fringe guy at 155, but you never know. You string some wins together, you can make something happen. It is a deep division. What did you make of the fight?
I'd like to see him fight Cowboy Cerrone next, but we'll get to that in a minute. And I'll get into why. So I thought Beneil Dariush was going to have a really big... he was going to have a big advantage on the ground. Frank Camacho is a decent grappler who doesn't get enough credit for it because he does just like to go in and brawl. But Beneil Dariush on the ground is one of the better grapplers in the lightweight division. And if he got the fight there, I thought it was over. I thought Beneil looked really good on the feet, though, too.
So did I.
He was jabbing up Frank Camacho. He had really good head movement, too. That's something that we see for Dariush is a bit of a weakness. He does take shots, but he moved really well on his feet. And then once the fight did get to the ground, it was over. Now, with the cowboy part that I just kind of blurted out, everyone wants to see Cowboy Cerrone in these really high profile fights.
Conor McGregor.
No, in these really high profile fights all the time. I want Conor to fight Gaethje. What I would like is if you want to get Cowboy on another run, you have to give him a guy at the lower end of the top 15. And I feel like Beneil Dariush, he isn't a name, but he's a guy who a lot of the hardcore fans would recognize. And if you get a win over him, you could almost use that as an excuse to say, oh, we just beat this super talented guy, and then we can throw him into more marquee main event type fights. But I feel like Beneil Dariush is the type of guy who would want a Cowboy to beat. That's all. That's the reason I say it. It's never going to get made, but it would be a fun fight.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's never going to happen because Cowboys ranked so highly. There's so many teasers out there with the McGregors, but I think it is good thinking on your part for sure. If we move into a co-main event,
Islam Makhachev, if not.
This one surprised the hell out of me.
Michael
because I had the fight scored for Michael Johnson.
I didn't.
I thought Michael Johnson won this fight, and Stevie Ray comes out and gets another win. I mean, Stevie Ray's one of those guys at 155. I mean, look at his past few fights. He normally fights on the undercard. Normally fights to start the prelims in and around there. I'm looking at the Yesin Ayari fight.
Fought Paul Felder on a main card, but that didn't go
Fought
well.
Paul Felder, and he has fought some decent names. He's just one of those guys that sticks in there. He's got his own gym in Scotland. He split time at TriStar in the past, and he gets a win over Michael Johnson. So it's less about what's next for Stevie Ray, because he's probably going to get another one of those maybe recognizable names, maybe one of the guys that Johnson's fought in the past. Probably not a Beneil Dariush, but somebody up around that 25 to 15 range, and that's what Stevie Ray is, realistically. But man, the one thing that we said in our predictions, and I'm not tooting my horn, I said this, is the fact that Michael Johnson fights to the level of his competition, and yet again, Michael Johnson fought to the level of his competition. Were you surprised? I shouldn't even say were you surprised.
Of course I was surprised. Michael Johnson beat Tony Ferguson, Edson Barbosa, and Dustin Poirier. Those are not only three of the best fighters in the world, they're three of the most dangerous and violent fighters in the world. He beat all of them. But he's lost to Stevie Ray, he's lost to Darren Elkins, and he barely beat Andre Fili, who I think is a good fighter, but still. His career doesn't make any sense at this point. It really doesn't. And I don't know how to make sense of it.
He beat Artem Lobov.
He beat Artem Lobov. God bless him for that. But he knocked out Dustin Poirier. He had a decision win over Edson Barbosa, and everyone thought he was going to be the next big thing when he beat Edson. I know he beat Tony a ways back.
Did not beat Habib.
He did not beat Habib. But still, he was fighting nothing but killers, so you're going to have wins and losses in there. And that was fine. But then when he went on kind of his most recent losing streak, and I know he's got a few wins kind of, peppered in there, but Michael Johnson shouldn't lose to Darren Elkins. Michael Johnson shouldn't lose to Stevie Ray. And I don't know if it's a mental issue. It doesn't look to be physical, because if you look, he still has the same skill set. It's a straight left in wrestling.
And the other thing, maybe people have figured him out and he hasn't advanced as a fighter, which is weird because I talked about it as a pro, the fact that he corners a lot of guys and he has somewhat of a coaching role at Hard Knocks. So it's kind of weird to see him in cage, just not really bringing everything together, not tying it in, because he pretty much just, puts the butter on the bread and does what he does every single time.
It's kind of like the Rory McDonald effect at this point, where I'm not saying Michael Johnson found religion and now it's changed his life. It's such a big deal, but he just doesn't have the same killer instinct that he did at one point. He looks sort of hesitant. He doesn't really commit to a lot of shots, and I don't know if that is because he took so much damage in that Justin Gaethje fight, and that's kind of when the decline of Michael Johnson started. I know he had losses before that, but that was kind of like the hard decline of it. And maybe he just realized there's some people out there who can do really, really bad things to you, and they don't get tired. And maybe he just thought, I'm never going to beat those guys, so let's just, not worry about getting back to the top. Let's just have fun fights. But Michael Johnson's not even competitive with guys like Stevie Ray. He's competitive, but for a guy like Michael Johnson, top 5 at one point, fought Habib, fought Dustin Poirier, he doesn't even look to be the same fighter anymore.
No, it's just weird. I mean, like I said, I did score the fight for Johnson. I saw a lot of, division on social media. Of course, it was a majority decision for Stevie Ray, but an interesting fight nonetheless. And we move into our main event. Really weird because I threw this out there. I think you and I talked about it. I talked about it with Keith Schillen before. Damian Maia, Ben Askren. The thing that's floated around on social media, and it happened right after this fight was over in the morning on Saturday, was UFC wrong in trading Ben Askren for Demetrius Johnson? A lot of people out there say, hey, Demetrius Johnson's still a top 10, even a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, which I don't know if I'd say top 5, but I would say top 10 for sure. I agree with those people out there. I think they're still right. I changed my mind. I think they were still right in getting Ben Askren. Dana White's come out and said they were right in getting Ben Askren, but why are they right?
Because Ben Askren made the UFC more money in 3 fights than Demetrius Johnson has in the last 10 years. And that's an unfortunate thing to say, because Demetrius Johnson is, of course, the better fighter, but he's not nearly as marketable. He doesn't get nearly the amount of headlines that Ben Askren gets. Ben Askren's the reason that there's a BMF title being fought for over this weekend. And even though it comes at kind of his cost, being the victim of such a hellacious knockout, that's still revenue for the UFC generated by Ben Askren. And if you look at all the press conferences, like when he first got signed, that first month before he fought Robbie Lawler was such a fun time to be an MMA fan. He was showing up to press conferences that weren't even for his fight, just having fun. And everyone loved it. And Demetrius Johnson, as phenomenal of a fighter as he was, he didn't really say much. He wasn't controversial in any way. And he almost had the Mike Tyson effect at a certain point where you were like, well, he's going to beat him. Like, why even bother?
Demetrius Johnson's kind of like the guy that you want your daughter to marry. I mean, he's perfect in every single way.
Probably
he's
a lovely young man.
He's squeaky clean. Like, he does everything by the book, which is great. Like, I like controversy. I like all that. On the other end of the spectrum, guys like Demetrius Johnson. I hate to say this because I do not really like this guy, but guys like Tom Brady, guys like that, they exude greatness, but you can tell off the field, out of the cage, whatever, they're halfway decent people. Exactly. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think Ben Askren, to a certain extent, moved the needle even more for the UFC, and even though it was a 3-fight stint and they threw him on an early morning Singapore card, you kind of had to do that because if you're going to go to Singapore and you have a contractual obligation to have so many fights in the city-state of Singapore, you got to throw a guy like Ben Askren there who was champ for a long time. Damian Maia continues to defy age, ends up getting the win there.
He's so good at 42.
We'll leave UFC Singapore there. We'll move on to Bellator 231, which
was not a good fight.
To me, I really enjoyed both cards. I had the chance to watch majority of it. First fight, Bellator 231, you had Rebecca Brigman taking on Elise Reed. Rebecca Brigman, otherwise known as Orion Star. She does hardcore things on Twitter that I would not show my worst enemy. Ended up getting, standing TKO against her.
You had to text them to me the night before.
It was rough. I had no idea who this was, and then all of a sudden I'm scrolling through, and anyway, it was intense.
She's taking a pounding outside the cage.
Next fight, you're not the first person to make that joke. John Manley and his unorthodox ways gets a win over Thiago Oliveira. Oliveira just got tired quick. John Manley is legit. If you've ever watched John Manley fight, whether it's UFC, Bellator, regional circuit, he's so awkward. He strikes weird. His grappling's good, and you never know what's coming. Gets a decision there. Tim Karen from Dana White's Contender Series gets a win over Lucas Pimenta. That was a close fight. Dalton Rasta gets a win over Claude Wilcox. Dalton Rasta, I believe he's 5-0 amateur, all first-round knockouts, and all wins by KO or TKO. Again here over Claude Wilcox. It's Steve Mowry, who's one of those guys that Bellator pushes with the DAZN commercials. Gets a win over Gokhan Sarakam, second round Kimura. Again, Steve Mowry just takes somebody down, submits him, which is weird because he has a kickboxing base.
It is.
And
it's quite odd.
It's kind of worrisome as well because I know Sarakam was 4-0 going into this fight, but he was kind of outstriking him in the first round, it is troublesome for a guy that trains at Hard Knocks to just go straight grappling as a way to win just about every fight. It does worry me because you have to think at some point Steve Mowry's going to go from fighting these, again, I say like binary numbers guys who are 0-0, 1-0, whatever, 4-0. He has faced 2 4-0 guys now to some legit competition like I don't know, you think Javier off the top of your head, but somebody that's up there that's a recognizable name.
I see it almost the other way. He's always going to have that kickboxing no matter what he does, so why not work on your grappling when you know that you're not fighting the highest level of competitions? I know I'm kind of going back on what I said with Cyril Gahn, but it is kind of the opposite. Like, if you're so good at grappling or at kickboxing, you want to be able to improve on your
in those exchanges, you don't see him winning them.
No, you don't. But I feel like this is what Steve Mowry did. He realized his kickboxing was really good. Everyone's going to try to take him down, so let's just work on his jiu-jitsu. And I feel like he almost did too much to a certain degree. So that now, every time he's striking, he's worried about the takedown. But once he gets down, he's kind of comfortable again. So I feel like just the in-betweens with him, and that eventually he will be able to kind of put everything together.
The next fight, and I believe I might have said Mealy at 125 earlier on in the show, but I meant to say 145, and she's already kind of entered into the title conversation at featherweight. So throw Jessie Mealy in there, and hopefully, and I'm dead serious, give Jessie Mealy a contract with Bellator and let her prove herself because she just beat Toledo Nogueira, who was coming off a loss for the title against Julia Budd. And it was a split decision. It says split on there. Jessie Mealy won that fight.
She did. It was a good fight.
I mean, she's 9-3. Who gives a damn? You beat somebody who's 7-0, which is kind of fishy because if you look at Toledo Nogueira's record, it's not that great. She didn't fight great competition. Came into Bellator kind of like that. Wins, title shot. kind of strange there, but Jesse Mealy, great performance. We already talked about that. My fight of the weekend, or one of them, was Kilismoda making his Bellator debut, taking on Mando Niello from TriStar, a guy from Toronto who drives to Montreal to train and back again and doesn't fight very often. It's once in a blue moon. Kilismoda looked great. Mando Niello actually took a similar game plan to Rory McDonald, which we'll talk about. He was very, very tentative in the fight and didn't do a whole lot. And a lot of people were disappointed in the outcome.
Listen, you have no idea how disappointed I am with those TriStar fighters right now. It just seems like, I don't know what's going on with TriStar. They don't win anymore.
That's what Hack Press does.
That's what Hack Press does, and that's about it. And unless George St. Pierre comes back to fight Khabib, I just don't know what's going on there.
Conor Dixon with a great performance. I actually want to highlight that. I know he's 2-0. This guy has great jiu-jitsu abilities, and it's early on in his career, but he got it done again first round in the first minute. He looked great.
To a guy who's never fought before.
I threw out a tweet, and I mentioned something about his jiu-jitsu, and a couple days later I get a like, and I thought, okay, something Dixon. I looked, and it's Conor Dixon's dad, and then a couple hours later, Conor Dixon's liking the tweet. So, the one thing I want to say, this guy's good at marketing himself, because it could be me, it could be Joe Blow, it could be anybody tweeting about Conor Dixon. He's going through and liking them. That's how you build a rapport and a brand. And so good on Conor Dixon, and I'm 100% serious there. You continue, you had one more prelim fight at flyweight, not much of a headline grabber. And then you had Jake Hager and Anthony Garrett. And Anthony Garrett in ring looks nothing like Anthony Garrett on Tapology. You can tell the muscles are there in the ring. On Tapology, he looks like they're all there all at once. But he's taken on a guy in Jake Hager who, a lot of fanfare, had his AEW co-stars there cheering him on. They're ripping promos. He comes out, he does his old entrance or new entrance that he still has. One groin shot. Referee kind of pulls him away. All right. Comes back in. More illegal knees. Bang, bang. They end the fight due to TKO. Garrett's down on the ground.
Yeah, it was hard to watch.
If you've ever been hit in the testicles, you know what it's like.
Yeah, you feel sick to your stomach for the day.
Yeah, it was terrible. But the weird thing about it is Hager plays like nice guy half the time and bad guy the other half. And then he went full heel on this and said that Garrett wanted a way out, which you could tell he obviously didn't.
He just wanted his nuts to be where they were when the fight first started.
It's weird. The thing I want to ask you, so you got Greg Hardy that has a no contest and a loss for some sticky situations. You've got another crossover guy like Jake Hager who, yeah, listen, he probably should have won this fight. But now it's a no contest because of illegal strikes. And he's an older guy too. I mean, he's not in the twilight of his, athletic career. He's in his late 30s. What do you expect from a guy like this? Like, what's his ceiling in the division? Do you see him ever taking on... Like, if you threw Jake Hager in against a guy like a Minikov, like a Czech Congo...
Okay, that might be the dumbest question ever. If you made a fake fighter fight a real fighter...
In a year.
No, he's not going to do well. He's too old. He's not that good of an athlete. And we've seen a lot of major holes in his MMA game so far. He doesn't have cardio. He doesn't have striking. He has a good wrestling acumen. And he can submit you on the ground. But even let's say he fights a Roy Nelson, who's 73 years old and is morbidly obese, Roy Nelson's still going to knock him out. I don't see why they're pushing Jake Hager so hard. If I understand his outside popularity, I get that. But as a talent, because eventually that's all people care about, he's not there yet. And it's not like he's going to fight any of these really good fighters. This is what he's going to do. Jake Hager's just going to keep on fighting guys who are 0-1, 1-1, 2-1. And then he's going to retire. He's never going to fight a guy who has double-digit wins and single-digit losses. He's going to keep on fighting guys like this and then go back to AEW.
So, Matt, we'll move along into our next fight. Alara Joanny taking on Bec Rawlings. Now, we already talked about Bec Rawlings and, the pitfalls of having her in Bellator and getting lost there. Alara Joanny looked amazing. She looked awesome.
She didn't fight a good MMA fighter, though.
No, but we talked about it. I mean, Pitbull Brothers and this and that. She had Leandro Higo in her corner. She looked awesome. The coolest part about it, I know she had the Arya Stark thing and she had the Game of Thrones entrance when she came out. It was, but a lot of people were talking about Alara Joanny, and she had her kill list, which was really cool. And if you get a chance, listen to the Loudmouth recap show with me and Keith, because he told a great story about that.
Craig's one of those people who thinks he's cool because he hasn't watched Game of Thrones, but... It was a good entrance.
It was great, and she already came out with names like Latorno, Valerie Lareda, her path to the title. I thought it was awesome. She looked great, and automatically, you put yourself in contention with that.
Yeah, without a doubt. And like you said, it wasn't the fact that, did the entrance hit or miss? It doesn't matter. The fact that people are talking about it's all you really care about at the end of the day.
Exactly. Next fight, Jason Jackson, Ed Ruth. One of the best fights I watched all weekend.
Them boys lit. I thought Jason Jackson won this fight. I'm going to just come out and say that right away.
Yeah, I had it scored for Jason Jackson 29-28. Jason Jackson, we talked about it. I believe we both picked Ed Ruth for this one. We did. But we said it was going to be like a fight of the night.
Jason Jackson's a very dangerous guy in the feet.
Holy smokes, he looked good.
And that's the thing. So it came
Ed Ruth has a chin of granite.
Ed Ruth could get hit by a train, Matt Hughes style, and I think he'd be fine.
That was too much.
Jason Jackson hit him with a hellacious right hand. And that's the thing, like, sometimes...
Even the kick early.
Sometimes you get dropped, and it's one of those things, like, it's just kind of like a flash where as you're going down, you put your hands up. No. Ed Ruth...
Like a load of bricks.
Exactly. Ed Ruth, to quote Jorge Masvidal, Jason Jackson baptized Ed Ruth. And Ed Ruth just gets back up, keeps on going forward, front kicks and jabs. It was a phenomenal fight, but that's what it came down to. Jason Jackson landed by far the heavier shots. He hurt Ed Ruth on numerous occasions. And I don't feel like Ed Ruth's cage control and takedown should equal the amount of damage that Jason Jackson inflicted on him. And
that's, again, to bring it back to the conversation I had with Keith, we previewed this fight, or we recapped it in a lot of detail, but the fact that he had it scored 29-28 for Ed Ruth because of the takedowns, because of the volume. He also threw out a somewhat controversial tweet on Twitter, of course, that said that Ed Ruth really gained a lot and moved a lot and strategized a lot more than he did in his last fight. I didn't see a whole lot more out of Ed Ruth than I did in any other fight. I know it's his second full camp with AK. We had a conversation with him before the fight. I saw more of the same. I saw, he set up his punches with a kick. He switched stances quite a bit. He pushed forward. The problem I had with Ed Ruth, I don't think I talked about it in the breakdown.
He doesn't move his head.
The problem is it's always on that center line, and it's very predictable. And Jason Jackson, rightfully so, was able to counter, get in close, and throw jabs. I mean, I'm really pumping up Jason Jackson. Ed Ruth had a great fight. It's another good win. It'll continue to propel him.
Both guys.
Jason Jackson, loses nothing.
No, and that's the thing. When judging a fight, if you want it to come down to things like volume and cage control, there's guys like Max Holloway who, they're volume fighters, but you look at what that volume inflicts on their opponent, and like Max Holloway's fights end in doctor stoppage or TKO later in a fight, because they're not just volume shots, they're damaging shots too. With Ed Ruth, I felt like a lot of them were just kind of like, okay, jab, 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 jab. A lot were just kind of landing on Jackson's hands too.
Yeah.
And then that should not count nearly as much as a right hand that floors Ed Ruth. That's just my personal opinion. That's how fights are supposed to be judged.
I just hope, for the sake of Jason Jackson, a guy who...
Give him a high-profile fight.
Titan, he was a Titan champ. He just coming off an LFA championship win, and he lost in Contender Series due to an ankle injury. Lock this guy up. Give him a 10-fight deal. You can't lose with a guy
I don't want to see him fight like Neiman Gracie next or anyone of that caliber.
No,
but
give him somebody decent.
Exactly.
Give him 2 years. Give him a European fighter. Give him somebody. Make it meaningful, because this is a guy you can build on. You already know Ed Ruth's a star. Make Jason Jackson into a star. He's a hard knocks guy. He's the perfect guy to try and build around.
And this could be a rematch a year and a half, 2 years down the road that could end up being a title eliminator. So there is a built-in story there. So let both guys kind of build on their own, and then hopefully we can revisit this fight in the future.
Phil Davis taking on Carl Albrechtsen in the co-main event. Really, again, I mean, not to pump our tires, but we previewed this one pretty much to a T. It's just a shame that Carl Albrechtsen, they brought him into a firestorm like this.
But he didn't look good, I didn't think. All of his punches were out of range. That was my problem, and it really bothered me the whole time. Do you ever fixate on one part of a fight, and you're like, why does he keep on doing that? Carl Albrechtsen kept on going 1-2 switch left kick to the body, and none of it would land. Like, Phil Davis would just back up, everything would land, and then Phil Davis would get back into range and hit him. It didn't make any sense to me.
The other nice thing to see, Phil Davis is a top light heavyweight in the world.
No, he's not.
Yes, he is.
I will disagree with you until the cows come home.
He's going to have split decision wins and losses, but mostly losses, to Ryan Bader every other weekend.
But he wouldn't
That's
beat guys.
The future.
I don't see Phil Davis beating a Volkan Oezdemir. I don't see him beating an Anthony Smith. I certainly don't see him beating a Dominic Reyes.
I don't know. He just continues to put on good performances. Even, I mean, he's 35 now?
He fought Carl Albrechtsen. Carl Albrechtsen looks like what one championship Sage Northcutt should look like.
There's a reason why they brought him in a built-in storyline with the Nemkov win, with the fight against Prohaksha. There's a reason why this one happened. I honestly think Phil Davis, again, still a top 15 light heavyweight.
I'll give him top 15, not top 10.
In the world. If we get into our main event, there's no sense.
It was sad. It was a terrible fight between two old men. If you ever want to go to like a Buffalo Wild Wings and wait outside when it closes, you could probably see a fight of that caliber.
Frank Mir had a smart game plan. He threw the leg kicks. It obliterated Nelson's power. It's going to be weird because, again, neither one of these guys had great records, previous track records coming into this one. Were you at all surprised? And again, it's never our place to say that somebody should. Were you surprised that Frank Mir didn't retire on a win, especially with his daughter in his corner?
I'm not, because this is my problem with guys like Frank Mir and Roy Nelson. They're never going to retire unless they're forced to. And I understand that's what makes them such great fighters in their prime. It's just that will to win, and that's all you want to do is compete. But there comes a certain point where, just kind of like the law of diminishing returns, it's not worth fighting at when you're 43. And when you have opportunities outside of just fighting, that's the thing. Like, Frank Mir speaks extremely well. He has a good podcast. He does a lot of speaking engagements outside of Bellator.
The weird thing... He commentated for Tito and Chuck 3. He does ACB and ACA. He used to do Strikeforce.
He does Bellator, too. He'll be on the desk.
When Bellator signed Frank Mir away from the UFC, they should have given him the keys to the desk, or they should have put him in the Big John McCarthy role, because and I'm not lying, there is nobody better to break down a fight as it's going on, to explain grappling exchanges and striking exchanges than Frank Mir. Frank Mir does a perfect job of articulating. Cormier does a great job too.
I think Cormier's a little bit better, but I do agree with you. Frank Mir is on that level of a Daniel Cormier, of a Michael Bisping, of any of those guys.
100%. And I think the UFC not keeping him around for that is kind of a mistake. Like, really, he does a great job.
I understand where the UFC is coming from, because you can't have a guy on USADA suspension also do all those things for you. So I get where they're coming from, why they had to get rid of him, but he is a perfect fit for Bellator. In this fight, Roy Nelson is the one who we really need to talk about with retirement. And like you said, it's not in our place to tell anyone to retire, but when all you have is a big right hand, and that your gimmick is you grab your stomach.
That's a problem. See, the big right hand is a myth now, because
that's what I mean.
When he throws, he'll throw an overhand right, and it doesn't do anything. And I know, the left leg was compromised, but still, go back to some of his other fights.
When was the last Roy Nelson knockout win?
His fight against Haratonov, it was Bigfoot Silva was his last knockout win. But when he fought Haratonov, he was throwing those overhand rights, and they'd hit, but there was nothing behind it. So I don't know if maybe a coaching role, a commentary role
could be nice.
A thing with, Jay Glazer's Unbreakable with the gym, because they do a lot together, but I don't know what the path is. But
I don't either.
We move on to 232, which was a better card in general. Some of the fun fights, Janelle Lugo looked awesome against John Duma, a guy that I want to see more. Keith had some good stories about that. You had the Hamburglar, Dan Cormier, who, according to Keith, is like a strawweight that actually had to gain to get to flyweight. Devin Powell coming over from Dana White's looking for a fight. He went 1-3 in the UFC. He did actually fight some decent competition.
He did, but still.
Gets a great win over Marcus Surin, and if you want to go out and check out those highlights...
It was like a front rear naked choke. It was a very odd submission.
Front naked choke.
Yeah, it was a very odd submission, but it was a great win for him.
Yeah, it was a good win for him, and maybe like a guy that's going to be a litmus test at 155 for Bellator, somebody that hopefully it's a multi-fight deal.
I'd like to see Sam Sicilia move up, and they could have a fun fight. That's just me personally.
Clash of styles. Next fight, you had Lance Gibson Jr. taking on Dominic Jones. We talked quite a bit about Dominic Jones. I had the chance to see 3 of his 4 pro fights on the NAF circuit. He was fighting Lance Gibson. Lance Gibson did Lance Gibson stuff and looked absolutely amazing. And this is one of those guys you're going to have to watch out for in the division. You had Ryan Hardy Evans, Demetrius Plaza. Hardy Evans getting the win before our main card. You had Kevin Ferguson Jr., Craig Campbell. Now, when I did a recap about this fight, I thought the first elbow was illegal. John McCarthy thought the first elbow was illegal. The first elbow was indeed illegal. And Baby Slice comes in on short notice, on like 2 days' notice. He wasn't even on the media cards for this one. And but drops no contest Craig Campbell. I don't know what you do here, but it's weird. It's weird. Next fight, Manny Miro beat Nick Newell. Nick Newell...
That's what I mean. Do Nick Newell versus Kevin Ferguson Jr. It's a fun fight. It's guys who people recognize. There you go.
Nick Newell got tired. It's now Patchy, not Patrick Mix.
Patchy Mitch, whatever his name is, he's an awfully good fighter. I'll tell
the question I have for you, he's 12-0 now as a pro. He's 11-0 as an amateur. He's had a lot of fights. He's beating, maybe Isaiah Chapman's definitely not
Ricky
a name.
Bandejas is.
And Ricky Bandejas is. Is he still a prospect at this point in his career?
I feel like he has kind of crossed that bridge or that gap to now he is officially a contender. And you can be a prospect and contender at the same time, but he's 100% near the top of the division all of a sudden. And you can't tell me you would not like to see him fight Darren Caldwell at 135.
Well, that won't happen.
I know it won't happen because of the whole tournament and everything.
What about a Horiguchi? Horiguchi or Leandro Higo?
Both those guys beat him. But he's
Or Dudu Dantas.
Dudu Dantas could be a fun fight. That would be one that I definitely want to watch. And the next fight though with Paul Daly and Syed Awad.
That's again. I mean, I said it in the prediction. Total dissolution of the training lab, but Syed Awad. It was like he was going in there to collect a paycheck.
Like,
he was hesitant.
Why would he not do EPO? Like, he has a direct hookup, and that's his one weakness, his cardio. I'm not even joking. Like, in Bellator, he'd probably get away with it.
I mean, Paul Daly's had over 60 pro fights, and the power's still there.
It's absurd.
And he fought a really technical fight, too.
But no, even, like, the shot that dropped Syed Awad, he just, like, clubbed it. It wasn't, like, one of those, like, perfect Paul Daly left hooks. He just clubbed him in the side of the head.
But it was one of those smart, like, the first round, obviously,
the elbow was nice.
Awad's coming in here on short notice, so he's got to kind of get it out of the way, get things done. So he kind of went in, but he was hesitant. He was rolling out of the way. It was a weird game plan, but again, on 6 days' notice, what are you going to do when you're in a 3-fight losing streak and you're moving up 20 pounds from the last fight you had? But Paul Daly just downloaded the information, comes out in the second round, and gets a win. And he's still
mopped the floor with him.
The thing with Paul Daly is he actually is really well-rounded. His defensive wrestling's good. He still has power, and he's a technical striker. I wonder what's next, because for me, I want to see the Lorenz Larkin fight again, but Larkin's most likely going to get a title shot.
Larkin is, but I don't see him winning that title shot. I do think we'll get that rematch eventually. I'd like to see Paul Daly fight, maybe a Neiman Gracie, maybe an Ed Ruth, maybe Jared Jackson, because eventually you're going to have one of these prospects fight a top contender. I know Ed Ruth fought Neiman Gracie, and Neiman Gracie fought Roy McDonald, but that was just because of how the tournament was set up. I would like to see eventually Paul Daly. He's going to have to fight one of these prospects. Korshkov's good, but we all know Korshkov's probably just going to be able to take him down and then just kind of work him there. That would be a really good fight that I didn't think of. So yeah, let's say Korshkov. That'd be a good one.
All right, and then in our main event, a bit of a stinker. But
Douglas
listen,
was the best welterweight on planet Earth. There, I said it.
The weird thing is, Rory McDonald, not that he thought that he won the fight, and of course you're going to think that, but the weird thing was, between the 4th and the 5th rounds, Firas Zahabi's instruction was to go out there and go for it. And in the last minute and a half of the fight, if you listen to the broadcast, all you could hear was somebody yelling, go, 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 for a minute and a half, which was Firas Zahabi to Rory McDonald. Yeah, he ended the fight in a decent position, but that was the only decent position he was really in the fight. And the weird thing was, his footwork and his head movement were great.
They actually were. Rory McDonald didn't look completely shot in this fight. That's why I'm giving Douglas Lima so much credit for this win. I don't think that this is the Rory McDonald that fought John Fitch. I don't think this is the Rory McDonald fought Neiman Gracie. I think it was a better one and a more, not even dedicated, because I do feel like he had the dedication in those other ones. He's just kind of more in the game. It just so happened that Douglas Lima had the answer for every question that Rory McDonald asked him. Whether it was the wrestling, Douglas Lima, he would either scramble out of it, he'd get those underhooks, and a great defense for wrestling is just power. If a guy's worried to come in at your hips because you can hit him once and put him to sleep, that's always going to be in the back of his head. Douglas Lima basically did to Rory McDonald what Rory McDonald used to do to guys. Had him on the defense the whole entire time. It was always Douglas Lima going for it, landing the jab, landing a lot of nice left hooks, a lot of good leg kicks, just doing Douglas Lima things.
Do you remember what you had the fight scored as?
I had it personally. I thought Douglas Lima won every round. I thought the first round not a lot happened, so you could have given it to Rory McDonald.
The one thing that I did see on social media was the fact that a lot of people gave Lima all 5 rounds. They said in the first round, Rory McDonald landed 0 significant strikes, which is pretty tough to tell in the moment because those stats aren't readily available from Bellator. I mean, geez, even the names, they blanked them out after the first 20 seconds, which is absurd. But still, I had McDonald in the first round. I had it 49-46.
But the 4th round is really when Douglas Lima started to take over, because the fight wasn't all that eventful. But in the 4th round, Douglas Lima, everything he threw landed. He kept on whipping Rory's head back with the jab. He kept on landing those hard leg kicks. Landed a few right hands that I thought hurt Rory, but no, it was just a good performance by Douglas Lima.
And the one other neat thing that I wanted to mention, you saw Douglas Lima at the end of the fight, after the night was over, was in the lounge, the main area there at the Mohegan Sun, with fans, just hanging out, going to see everybody. And it's a great thing. And I know if McDonald won, he probably would have done the same, but it's a good thing to see out of your champion.
Well, even like when Douglas Lima and Rory McDonald, he's all beat up and he's answering questions. Like, Douglas Lima went out of his way to go tell Rory McDonald good job after.
Oh, and they hugged it out.
Douglas Lima is the type of champion that you want in an MMA organization. He's a really smart guy, can speak 3 different languages. He's a good looking guy. He has exciting fights. Like, he's a guy who is a perfect fit for Bellator because he has all the X factors. He just doesn't talk a lot of crap.
And it was weird because a tweet was just thrown out there, and I gotta say it, by Sean Grande, who has in the past commented for Bellator and since deleted the tweet.
Diego Lima's.
But said that, it'd be interesting to see if Douglas Lima wasn't a bigger star, if he wasn't living in the shadow of his brother Diego Lima, which was...
Diego Lima can barely win a fight. Douglas Lima's
He's been good lately.
I understand, but Douglas Lima's out here bodying the best welterweights on planet Earth. It's not even a good comparison.
Well, Matt, we're going to transition out of the recap into the preview, and we did our 2-minute predictions for the main card and our 5 minutes for the co-main and the main, but if we just kind of breeze through this card, this is one of the more fun cards you're going to see this year.
A lot of close fights.
There were a lot of good ones at the end of last year. This is one of the better ones for the end of this year. And I know 245 is going to be great, but 244 is pretty good. Julio Arce taking on Hakeem Dawodu. I said this in the past on record. I wish Julio Arce fought every single friggin' weekend because he's so much fun.
I think he loses, though. I think Dawodu by decision.
Hakeem Dawodu did not look good in his first fight in the UFC.
He didn't, but I just feel like the leg kicks and just sort of the overall pace of his is going to be able to win this fight.
And he's been on a roll lately. He's looked a lot better. He was great in World Series of Fighting. And yeah, I'm really looking forward. This could be, there's so many fight of the nights.
I don't think this fight of the night. I'm just going to say that now.
This could be a great one. Then you've got Lyman Good taking on Chance Rencounter. Have to shade Good in that one. I know
Good by
the fight against Damian Maia didn't go all that well.
Oh, really?
Still.
He didn't fight Damian Maia well. That's weird.
Caitlin Chukagian, Jennifer Maia.
That's when you go get snacks.
There's legit title implications in that fight. Jennifer Maia has gone on record as saying that she thinks, a win here, she fights Shevchenko, and she has a decent shot at beating Shevchenko.
I think actually Michael Jordan in horse, but that's...
Your former Invicta champ there with Maia. It's a fun fight. Your Zenio Rosenstruck.
Chukagian by decision, though.
I would favor Chukagian there. Though Maia, the weird thing is she weighed in quite a bit over in her last fight. She weighed 126 the fight before that. You have to kind of wonder this week. You never know what's going to happen. So I do worry about that. You've had consistency from Chukagian as far as weigh-ins are concerned. Your Zenio Rosenstruck versus Andrei Arlovski is interesting because when Rosenstruck came into the UFC, I was really excited. I went back and watched the tape. How good of a kickboxer he was. Matt told me I was an idiot.
No, I didn't.
Yes,
I said, I don't know if that's going to translate well to MMA.
But he's taking on Arlovski. You favor Rosenstruck in this fight.
Yeah, I favor the guy who can throw head kicks as a heavyweight over the older guy. But here's the thing. If Andrei Arlovski does what he's been doing lately and just go crazy heavy volume and good head movement, he could win this fight by decision. I don't think the chin's going to hold up in this one, though. I think Jairzinho by TKO round 1.
Edmund Shabazian, Brad Tavares. At one point earlier on this week, Edmund Shabazian was around par, if not an underdog in this fight, which really surprised me because, yeah, the Darren Stewart fight wasn't great, but since then his wins have looked great. We haven't seen Brad Tavares since his loss to Israel Adesanya,
a year and a half ago.
That's a tough loss, but yeah, a year and a half ago. And everything that Brad Tavares does well, Edmund Shabazian brings a bit of a hybrid approach and also does better at. So I favor Shabazian in that fight, and I like how you've got a good young fighter, undefeated. Yes, I know the Tarverdian and the Ronda Rousey kind of connection there, but I really do like Edmund Shabazian.
I think he could. I do think Brad Tavares has wrestling defense to make this fight hard on Edmund Shabazian, but I do think this is an Edmund Shabazian win. This is a good fight for a prospect because he is going to face some adversity in this, but he should win.
Sugar Shane Burgos taking on one of the most interesting...
It's Hurricane Shane. That's not his nickname at all, correct? It's Hurricane Shane Burgos fighting Mac Amirkhani. And in this fight, Craig thinks Mac Amirkhani has a good chance, and I have no idea why.
Mac Amirkhani, if he can break through in a North American market, could be a really big star
He's not
featherweight.
Even good, though.
He got a great win over Chris Fishgold in his last one. Say what you will, but Chris Fishgold, former Cage Warriors champ, hasn't looked great in the UFC, but still.
And then he got dropped 4 times by Jason Knight before that.
He still won the fight. And then Shane Burgos, yeah, I mean, the Calvin Kattar loss, like, that happens. That happens.
Yeah, Calvin Kattar's really, really good.
Everything else has been great. I know he has a grenade on his shoulder, if I'm not mistaken, which is very cliche, but it should be a fun fight. It really should
Shane Burgos is going to win by hellacious knockout in the second round, though.
I'll go official with Shane Burgos, but I'm looking forward to it. Corey Anderson, Johnny Walker, you know what to expect there. Corey Anderson, we've talked about it in the past.
He doesn't move the needle.
It's a shame because he said, the UFC said, she said that he doesn't move the needle, but he's taking on Johnny Walker, who spent a full training camp in Russia for this one.
That man's crazy.
More than likely coming out with the Russian colors, which is interesting.
Johnny Walker by knockout.
I'm taking Walker here, and then I think it's one of those top guys. It could be the Blachowicz,
I'd like to see
Souza winner.
I'd like to see an Anthony Smith fight.
It could be Smith. It could be a whole lot of different names, even maybe Reyes if he doesn't get a title shot.
Reyes puts him to sleep.
Kevin Lee Gillespie, we already talked about it in the predictions, but
Just quick
I think
though,
we
I
both...
have Kevin Lee by decision.
Yeah, I went with Lee as well. Derek Lewis, Ivanov. I went with Lewis.
I think Blagoy's going to win a decision, and I'm not happy about saying that.
Stephen Thompson, Vicente Luque. I'm going with Wonder Boy.
I think Wonder Boy should win. There's so many questions about his chin at this point. I'm going to pick Vicente, but Wonder Boy's more likely to win, but I do think Vicente wins, if that makes any sense.
If so, how? I just want to know.
I think he's going to stop him. I feel like he could be able to drop Wonder Boy. And if you look, Vicente has some of the best leg kicks in the UFC, and he doesn't get credit for it. Like, that's how he beat Nico Price. And I know Nico Price is a much different fighter than Wonder Boy, but he's
on a roll.
And they both use that really long stance, too. And that's how Anthony Pettis is able to slow down Wonder Boy, use a lot of those leg kicks. I feel like Luque is going to be able to slow him down with the kicks, set up with the hands, and if it goes to the ground, I mean, Luque has some phenomenal submissions. His head and arms, his Anaconda, Kimura. Just Vicente Luque is a very underrated grappler as well. I feel like he'll be able to win by
In the co-main event, Kelvin Gastelum, Darren Till, if the fight is to happen this way and Gilbert Burns doesn't run in and slot himself
If Gilbert
there,
Burns can go out there and choke out Kelvin Gastelum, I'll lose my mind.
I'm taking Till in this one.
I don't know how. Darren Till got knocked out by Jorge Masvidal, and I do feel like a large part of that was attributed to the really hard weight cut that he had going down to 170. For a lot of fighters, that is just like an excuse they want to throw out there. It's all, I had a bad weight cut. But for Darren Till, it's very obvious. Like, he wasn't just a big welterweight. He was so much bigger than anyone he fought. I feel like Kelvin's going to be able to win.
I hope the stresses of this week don't affect it too badly, which does make me worry because there's conflicting reports of whether or not he'll arrive in New York on Thursday or on Friday with the weigh-ins. If it's on Friday, if I'm the UFC, you're getting scolded hard. Yeah. That's a tough look.
But this is my problem. Max Holloway moved up to fight Dustin Poirier at 155, and we can all agree Max Holloway's maybe not technically the better fighter, but he's a more well-rounded fighter, and on the pound-for-pound list, he is better. But that one fight up, it takes time to adjust to a new weight class. You can't just go fight the best all of a sudden. And I feel like this is what Darren Till's doing. If Darren Till was fighting, let's say, Brad Tavares, I would pick Darren Till. And then if he fought Kelvin Gastelum and we saw how good he looked at 185, that would give us a better answer. But I just feel like Gastelum's proven that he's one of the best at 185, and he's going to be able to win by knockout.
And in our main with Masvidal and Diaz for the BMF title, we're both in the air. I mean, we went on record as Diaz. It's a tough one.
So here's the thing. I think if you don't move or have really good wrestling, Nate Diaz is always going to be hard to fight because he's just going to stay in your face, throw a lot of volume. And if you take him down, God help you, because he's probably going to choke you unconscious. The only guys who beat Nate Diaz are guys like Rafael dos Anjos, guys like Benson Anderson, who are good enough wrestlers and at jiu-jitsu that they can take you down, hold you there, and be able to navigate the ground well enough to not get swept or not get submitted. Jorge Masvidal is a very underrated wrestler and grappler. He's a guy who
Let me go on record as saying I totally agree with you there.
Okay. He went out, he fought Damian Maia. He didn't win, but he didn't get submitted, which is a feather in his cap nonetheless. He did put on a pretty good performance. And Damian Maia doesn't matter. Like, Nate Diaz is phenomenal at jiu-jitsu. He's not Damian Maia. And size-wise, Damian Maia is way bigger. So if you can do that against a grappler with Maia's acumen, I don't think Nate Diaz will be able to catch you on the ground unless it's something due to a transition. I'm going to pick... I think Nate Diaz by submission. I just think the volume is going to be too much for Masvidal. He could win by like TKO due to doctor stoppage or something like that. Maybe the volume is going to cause a lot of damage to Masvidal, but that's the only way I see it going.
Yeah, I've got Diaz as well. If we roll on through, you've got PFL again in the tournament format for the playoffs, which is always interesting because some people like it, some people don't. The 2 fights in one night. The reason I don't like it, your best fighter in your roster, Magomed Karimov, fights, wins, beats Ray Cooper.
He's awfully boring to watch, though.
He's boring to watch. He's good, though.
He is good, but he very much has the Jake Shields effect.
But then the issue is he's injured, so he's out of the whole damn thing. Then insert your fighter... Or, sorry, he beat Chris Curtis. You insert Chris Curtis back into it. He loses to Ray Cooper, and then Chris Curtis retires. It's stupid to have 2 fights in a night for that reason, because your best fighter and your champ from the season before, he's undefeated in the PFL. He gets hurt, now he can't fight for the belt. Like, it's just stupid. It's
unfortunate.
But again, you've got the continuation of the playoffs. It's weird seeing Emiliano Sordi, who I thought was going to have a lot of success here, taking on a guy who's 1-2. But listen, some decent fighters on the card. Jordan Johnson, recognizable name, lost his PFL debut. He was undefeated in the UFC, 11-1 now. Rashid Yusupov, who I was really high on coming into the PFL season. Kelvin Tiller, Mama's boy, taking on Ali Isaev. Jared Rochel taking on Mo DeReese.
He's also pretty
For me, again, the 2 big fights here. You've got Dennis Goltsov taking on Satoshi Ishii, who... Oh, Satoshi. And Francimar
Good
Barros still up there taking on Alex Nicholson. So that is your PFL. And then, of course, depending on how they slot in the wins, some of these men might fight twice. You've also got Invicta FC 38. Interesting on there. The fight that I really wanted to point out, of course, you have Vanessa Porto, who's fought a who's who of women's fighters, whether it's 125 or not, taking on Karina Rodriguez. But Kanako Murata taking on Emily Ducote. And Matt, we talked about this fight before we saw it. Emily Ducote, again fighting for a belt. I find her records deceiving. I know she's 8-5. 2 of those losses are to Alima Lay McFarland for the belt in Bellator. Since she's left, she's looked awesome. I mean, she got a TKO win in her last fight. She's looked like a totally different fighter at 115. So it should be a good fight against a fighter who's 10-1 and who has also fought legit competition. Matt's laughing because before this we talked
Emily
about the fact,
Ducote's not like...
the fact that she trains at Lombard's gym, which is an appendage
That's just
of ATT.
a weird thing to do, yeah.
Yeah, but it should be a good fight. So look forward to that because Ducote in Invicta has looked different from Ducote that was in Bellator.
She is a much more improved fighter than she was.
Yeah, and her record is deceiving there. And then the other thing that we wanted to mention, a really good fight in the main event.
I gotta bring up the poster again. What a cool poster.
Yeah, I mean, Combate, depending on what you think of them, and Campbell McLaren's over-the-top annex.
He's a character.
He's fun. He has fun.
The kid's got moxie.
And I like it. And the one thing I wanted to point out, Mike Santiago taking on Luis Luna. You'll recognize Santiago from his time in the UFC. Fought a cast of characters in his fights there. And had a win on Contender Series in the first season. The main event, Angelo Trevino taking on Gilbert Urbina. Reason why that's interesting. Angelo Trevino's last fight was against Austin Vanderford.
Exactly. Mr. Van Zandt, as many of you would know him.
On Contender Series, and it's going to be really interesting to see what we get. I know it says a catchweight of 175. He's taking on Gilbert Urbina, who's 23 years old, fighting out of the BMF ranch, 5-1.
That's pretty cool.
So it should be a fun fight there, and I just wanted to bring that up because, again, we like to say this, but there's more than just the UFC on these weekends, and it's always good to check out some of these other promotions, whether you can catch Combate somewhere, whether you can catch Invicta on Fight Pass or PFL. I know up here in Canada it's on TSN, in the States it's on ESPN, so it's pretty cool that you get to see that kind of stuff, and we're really looking forward to all the fights this weekend as well as UFC 244. We had a lot of fun with the 2-minute predictions. We got way more in depth than I thought we would with the predictions and the recaps, but it's always a lot of fun to go through those. We had a lot of great fights last weekend. We have a lot of good ones coming up this week. If you want to find us on the old social medias, you can find me at Craig Allen FNP.
Matt Allen FNP.
Easy enough. Don't forget to check out our 2-minute predictions, our 5-minute predictions for the main and the co-main of UFC 244. Like I said, find us on Twitter and Instagram. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you made it all this way, we want to thank you specifically for the support. And Matt, we will see you again next week. And like I like to say now, it's the catchphrase.
It's all you, Craig.
Let's get into it.